Hello! Olá, tudo bom? Hello everyone! Welcome to this Q&A. I'm very excited to be here with you today. Let me know if you guys can see me and hear me well. I see Jacob. Oi, Jacob, tudo bom? Okay, so today we are going to talk about the last lesson that I published on YouTube on Tuesday. And in the last lesson, I talked about the history of São Paulo, which is one of the most important cities in Brazil. It is the largest city in Brazil and South America. So this is a very interesting topic because it is important to know a little bit of the history of the place when you're learning a language, right? Because you understand so much more about the culture and everything is connected. Tudo bom, Margos? Apple juice. Tudo bom, gente? Okay, so I hope you guys can see me and hear me well. I have already a couple of questions that I received in advance from students that are enrolled in the YouTube club. So if you guys have been following me for a while on YouTube, you know that it is a lot of work to have these videos published every week. So if you want to support me and to say, to appreciate, to show your appreciation to my work, I recommend you join the YouTube club, Speaking Brazilian YouTube club. In this course, you have access to my videos with the transcript and translation, and the videos are organized in the order that I recommend that you watch them. Okay, also you have access to a place to ask questions, and I will answer your questions in the Q&A, and you can also suggest topics for new videos. Okay, so just go to my website, speakingbrazilian.com, and then click on YouTube Club to learn more. To sign up, you can try for 1 week for free. Okay, guys, today is the birthday of a dear friend, my dear friend Thibaut, who lives in France. Happy birthday! Feliz aniversário! Beijo grande! Guys, I'm so excited about something. I just received the news that an interview that I gave last week was published. So I gave this very interesting interview to the podcast called Lungpreneur. So it is reduction of language entrepreneurs. So the podcast, they invited me for an interview, and we talked about my school, how I created this school. So if you're interested in learning a little bit about my work, it is not about Portuguese, it is about the school, the business side of my school, why I decided to open the school, how everything worked from the beginning. If you're interested in learning a little bit more, take a look, go take a look at this podcast. It is available on the website lungpreneur.com. If you are on my mailing list, I'm going to send you the link later. Okay, so go check it out, lungpreneur.com, and then click on podcasts. You find my podcast there. Okay? Okay, guys, so let's get started. Let's talk about the last video, a little bit of history, Brazilian history. Not only when you talk about the history of one city, you're actually learning the history of the entire country because everything is connected, right? Especially São Paulo, which is a very old city, and it has so much history. So just one last comment about why am I speaking Portuguese? Isn't this why am I speaking English? Isn't this a Portuguese class? So yeah, if you can understand Portuguese, congratulations, that is amazing. You are amazing. But a lot of students in this channel, they cannot understand Portuguese yet. They are beginners, they're just starting to study. That's why I speak English in these Q&As. My videos that I record in the studio and that I have time to edit and add subtitles, I always speak Portuguese because I know it is very important for you guys to listen to Portuguese. But in the live classes, I cannot add subtitles. It is impossible, so that's why I speak English, okay? But I will speak a little bit of Portuguese when we are talking about the lesson, tá bem? Okay, but today's topic is actually not about Portuguese, but we will discuss some terms, Portuguese terms, right? So it is about history. So I talked about when São Paulo was created, was founded. And so you guys, can you guys tell me when the Portuguese people arrived in Brazil? Let me know in the comments. Do you remember the date? It is a round date, so it's not too difficult to remember. So as the rest of the Americas, Brazil was colonized by Europeans, especially Portuguese. We had a lot of other Europeans coming to Brazil, mostly Portuguese and Spanish, but also people from other places. But in the end, Brazil was colonized by Portuguese, and we were part of Portugal, a colony of Portugal for a long time. The Portuguese, muito bom. So Astrid answered 1500. So how do you say this number in Portuguese? Let's practice. 1500. 1500. So in Portuguese, we never say 1500. We don't do that. We always say 1500, okay? So 1500, 1500. So this is when the Portuguese first arrived in Brazil. Muito bom, muito bom. So Brazil was a colony, Portugal colony from 1500 to 1822, 1822. Excelente, José. You are good. You know the numbers, the dates. Excelente. So, and how about São Paulo? When was São Paulo created? When the city was born? Of course, all these places, they existed before. We had a lot of indigenous people living in Brazil and also in São Paulo. So, and the name of the region where São Paulo was first founded, called Piratininga, was the name of the region. But then in 1554, 1554, São Paulo was created because the Jesuits, right? They went to Brazil. They wanted to teach indigenous people to read and write and teach their religion. So they founded this school in São Paulo, and that's when and how São Paulo was created. And around this school that they founded in São Paulo, the city grew, and now we have this huge, big city that is very, very one of the largest cities in the world. So what else? Muito bom, José. Excelente. 1554. Let's practice the number again. 1554. 1554. Excelente. So questions, what language was spoken in Brazil before the Europeans? So many languages. So in Brazil today, we still have hundreds of languages, indigenous languages. And when the Portuguese arrived, probably much more, because the indigenous people were killed. It is a very sad part of our history, right? All the history of colonizations always have this very sad side, but yeah, hundreds of languages. One language that it is very famous in Brazil that was mentioned is Tupi-Guarani, but there are so many variations. I really don't have like very specific informations, but so many languages, and many of these languages still exist in the indigenous reservations. They still speak their native languages. Muito bom. Excelente. We didn't have a general language before that. It was like each indigenous people, each group of indigenous people, they have their own language, right? It was not an unified country, right? So Portuguese now is spoken everywhere because the country was unified by Portugal, but before that was just like, it was not a country, it was not Brazil, it was something else. Muito bom. What else, guys? Other questions? Obrigada, Michael. Okay, so I have one question here that I received. While you think about questions, guys, and let me know in the comments. If I don't read your question, just copy and paste again, because it's hard for me to go back and read all the comments, okay? So I'm going to answer a question that I received from a student of the YouTube club. His name is Michael. Michael asked, o que são bandeirantes? Bandeirantes. So I talk about the bandeiras, and the bandeirantes in the video. He's asking me how to say that word in English. I don't think there is a very accurate translation into English. I'm not sure if this concept existed in other countries, maybe yes, but bandeirantes is basically a kind of explorer. So the bandeiras, what we call bandeiras or entradas, we have the word bandeira, singular, which means flag, right? Each country has one flag, it's a bandeira. But when in this context, when you're talking about the colonization of Brazil, bandeiras is the name that of the expeditions that entered the unknown part of the country to look for gold and precious stones, and also they capture indigenous people and slaves, African slaves. So that were the bandeiras. So it was a kind of expedition to, so these expeditions, they had these three main goal. They had the goal to expand the territory, the Portuguese territory, because at that time they were fighting with the Spanish and other Europeans for territory. So the bandeirantes, these explorers, with these bandeiras, these expeditions, they were expanding the territory of the Portuguese. And they also were looking for gold and other precious things. They were looking for things to valuable things, and they also were capturing and enslaving indigenous and capturing African slaves. Okay, so these were the three main things connected with these people, the bandeirantes. So bandeirante you could translate as this kind of explorer. They were armed, heavily armed explorers, expanding the Brazilian territory for the Portuguese. Okay, any question about that? The video was not about specifically that, but that is one important part of the history of Brazil and São Paulo. And in São Paulo, we have this huge monument called Monumento às Bandeiras, which is in honor of these expeditions. So this monument is really weird because actually when you think about bandeiras today, it was super sad, right? What happened, and they were. So yeah, so this monument is widely criticized because of obvious reasons. Even though it is a beautiful monument, it is right in front of Ibirapuera Park. It is a touristic site in São Paulo. Okay, it is huge, right in front of Ibirapuera Park. Okay, so looking for questions, guys. Let me know if you have questions. I'm going to read some of the comments. So, question from Juan. Os indígenas brasileiros podem se entender com os paraguaios por causa do Tupi-Guarani? Well, I don't know how to answer that. Maybe they have some languages in common, so probably they can understand each other. But there are so many languages. I'm not sure if they can really, maybe the Tupi-Guarani, but I don't know if they can really communicate with each other. It really depends on the people, and really depends on the language that they speak. Of course, that in Brazil, most indigenous people, they speak Portuguese as well, so they have their own mother language and also Portuguese because it's easier for them to communicate with the rest of the country. But we do have some indigenous that don't have any contact with the rest of the country, non-indigenous people or even other indigenous people. So these people, they only speak their own language and they have their own lifestyle. They don't interact with the rest of the country. There are not many of them, but I heard there are. I watched a documentary about that, very interesting. So of indigenous people that live in the Amazon that are still living their own life without having any connection with the rest of the country. That's interesting, right? Okay. So Jacob says, I found that monument to be very interesting. You mentioned that it's criticized, but I'm surprised they leave it up. Yeah, it is complicated. We have, unfortunately, in Brazil, we have still this conflict. Not everyone is against what happened. I know it is sad to think about it, but not everyone is against what the bandeiras did, you know? So we have both sides in Brazil, unfortunately. Okay. What made Brazilian Portuguese different from European Portuguese, who changed the language a bit? Well, it is really hard to explain that, I think, with so many. I think Brazilian Portuguese is also a mix of Portuguese with all the other languages from the immigrants. We had a huge amount of immigrants coming from, of course, especially Africans coming from that were brought to Brazil as slaves. They were not brought by their own choice, but they went to Brazil, and their language influenced a lot of Portuguese, and much more than in Portugal, because in Portugal they didn't actually have that, right? They only brought slaves to the colonies, not to their country. And so that influenced the language, and also all the other immigrants that we had later. I think that's one factor. And it is hard for me to tell which language changed the most, but I heard linguists saying that Brazilian Portuguese actually looks a little bit more like the original Portuguese spoken in the colonial period than Portugal Portuguese. You know, it is interesting to think about that actually Brazilian Portuguese looks a little bit more like Old Portuguese, but I'm not sure about that. I think both languages changed a lot, but I think Brazilian Portuguese has all of these influences from other places, much more than Portugal, I guess. Muito bom. Há canal de TV chamado Rede Bandeirantes. Yes, so this is one TV channel in Brazil, Bandeirantes. We use this word a lot. We have this huge highway in São Paulo called Rodovia dos Bandeirantes. It's a big highway. And also this TV channel. This is a very common name used in Brazil for, because it is very important thing. It's an important part of our history. Even though it was not a nice part of the history, but it is part. Some people see it as usually when you learn at school, actually you learn, we saw it as a very nice thing, because the bandeirantes were expanding the Brazilian territory, you know? So, wow, heroes. But when you really think about it, it was not exactly like that. Okay, so Alexandre is giving us some information about the languages. That's interesting. São Paulo se falava Nhengatu. Okay, interesting. Muito bom, I didn't know that. Okay, so more questions. Is São Paulo the business commercial capital of Brazil? What are your thoughts on the quality of life and safety versus other major cities like Rio de Janeiro? I think the safety and quality of life of São Paulo and Rio are very similar, in my opinion. However, Rio de Janeiro has all the beaches and the mountains, so maybe I think that adds to the quality of life. But when it comes to the city itself, they are similar in the sense that they're big cities. They are both dangerous cities, so you have to be careful. They're really big, and also, like when it comes to safety, I think I would say they are the same. But when it comes to quality of life, it really depends on what you like. If you like to go to the beach, then Rio de Janeiro for sure, but not everyone likes that. So São Paulo have other things that adds to quality of life, like they have beautiful parks and a lot of museums and cultures and clubs. So it really depends on your lifestyle. But I think they would be similar in this context, and they're both big and the two most important cities in Brazil, and the richest cities are São Paulo and Rio. São Paulo is more business and commercial than Rio de Janeiro. The other cities compared to São Paulo and Rio, they're really, really smaller and less. But we have so many other big cities in Brazil as well, but nothing compared to São Paulo and Rio, I guess. We have other big cities. Brasilia is big, the capital, Belo Horizonte. But Belo Horizonte feels like a small city when compared to São Paulo. So yeah. Okay, guys, looking for more questions and comments. Oh, I'm not sure about that, Ravel. Palavras do português brasileiro se originam do tupi, não tem correlação com as palavras do castelhano. I have no idea about that. I don't know if there's any connection with tupi and castelhano. I don't know. Maybe because they were all like close, so there are a lot of similarities between Portuguese and Spanish, but I'm not sure about tupi and the other languages. I have no idea. So, qual é a religião do Brasil? So, the most common religion in Brazil is Catholicism, but there are many, many, many other religions in Brazil. There are a lot of African descendant religions, Candomblé, Umbanda, a lot of other Christian religions as well. But I think the largest one, the most common one, is Catholicism. Ok, so yeah, eles falam cristianismo, exatamente. So cristianismo, there are many religions based on Christianismo, right? And and Umbanda and Candomblé are religions that were brought with the slaves, African slaves. Okay, looking for more questions, guys. What is the hardest part of teaching? So this is a fun question. Actually, the hardest part of teaching Portuguese is to think of ways to explain things in an easy way that you guys will understand. Because sometimes you guys ask me a question about Portuguese, and I know how to use that, and I know sometimes I even know, most of the times I even know the rules, the grammar rules, but then when I explain, it really doesn't make any sense to speakers of other languages. So my biggest challenge is to try to think with your mind of how the student will see this and try to explain in a way that will be helpful for you. Because the way that we Brazilians learn Portuguese is so different from the ways that I teach Portuguese, because everything, a lot of things are natural for us. Like when you go to school, we don't learn what is the difference between the verbs ser and estar, because it is obvious. We learned that when we were 1 year old at home with our parents. So we don't need to learn that at school. But then when I have to teach you guys, I need to think about, what is actually the difference? I have to analyze and think about all the examples, because we Brazilians don't think about that. It's just natural. Same thing, the difference between pretérito perfeito and imperfeito, the two past tenses. It is natural for us. We never learned this difference at school because we were born knowing, you learned at home, just listening to our parents, and that's natural for us. But when you think about someone else, when I'm teaching you guys, I have to think, that's not natural for them, so how can I explain that? So we don't find this difference, these explanations in grammars, because the grammars were made for native speakers. They were not made for other speakers. So that's my biggest challenge, to think of ways to explain things for you that are actually super obvious for Brazilians but are not obvious for other speakers. Ok, so Vidar, você pode falar um pouco mais sobre os barões de São Paulo? Why did São Paulo become such a central location for coffee trade? Muito obrigado. Well, the barões were the rich landowners that own coffee, right? So that's how we call them, barões do café. I don't have a lot of information about this now, but I know that we just had a lot of coffee plantations in São Paulo and also Minas Gerais, and that brought a lot of, that grew a lot, that became the most important product in Brazil for a long time, but I don't know why. I don't know all the details about it, but I know that it's still something big in Brazil. We have a big production of coffee in Brazil, especially São Paulo and Minas Gerais, but I don't know how to explain you why, but certainly this made São Paulo grow. So certainly this was one of the factors that made São Paulo become what it is today. Muito bom. Looking for more questions, guys. You guys have very good questions. Which city has a better nightlife? I am not 100% sure, but I would say São Paulo. São Paulo has a huge options of clubs and nightlife. I'm not a person that goes out at night much, so I'm not the best person to ask this. If you have Brazilian friends, I'd recommend you ask them. But I would say, I would guess São Paulo for sure. I think it is São Paulo. I mean, not for sure, but I think it is São Paulo. Okay. What is the big difference between Portuguese spoken in São Paulo and Salvador? Oh, that's interesting. The accent is very different. Let me think of one difference. The letter O in the northeast is usually more open than in the southeast. So let's think about the word coração. Coração means heart. And in São Paulo, we would say coração. And in Salvador, they would say coração. They would open the sound a little bit more. And also the R's, I think the R's are a little bit different, like the word mar. Mar means sea, the sea. I think in São Paulo, we would say mar, the flap T sound, like the fricative R, mar. But in Salvador, they would say mar. So I think these are a couple of differences. But in general, if you listen to people speaking, the way, the intonation, the way they move, the link, the words are different. I love the accent from Bahia. It's so beautiful. Muito bom. Looking for more questions, guys. So many good questions. What is the most rewarding part of being a teacher? Oh, when a student learn something and use it speaking, it is such an amazing feeling to see that this student understood and it is using what you just taught. I think it is the most rewarding, and seeing the students sometimes coming. I have many students that started with me from the beginning and they learned from the beginning. Today they are fluent in Portuguese. They have been with me for over 2 years, and I can see how they grew, how they learned. That's very rewarding. Okay. I saw one of your interviews with a native Portugal speaker. Which language is easier to learn and the most common? Are you talking about Portugal, the two Portuguese, Brazilian and Portugal? I don't think there's one easier than the other because it is the same language, actually. The rules are the same. So there's a very small difference between the two. There's the accent is different and just a little details on grammar and vocabulary. So I don't think there is one more easier or more difficult than the other. But if you're talking generally about any language, then it really depends on what is your mother language, right? If you already speak any other Romance language, then learning another Romance language is not that difficult. But if you don't speak any Romance language, it is very difficult to learn a new one. Also, for me, in my experience, the hardest language to learn so far for me was German, because it is not a Romance language, so it is so different from the languages that I know. So it really depends on your background. Okay, looking for more questions, guys. A maioria das empresas estão na Avenida Paulista. Well, there are a lot of companies, big companies in Avenida Paulista. I'm not sure if they're all there. I think São Paulo is so big, and there are many other very important avenues with a lot of companies, big companies. There is Avenida Brigadeiro Faria Lima, which is also huge and with a lot of companies, and many other places as well. So, but I think there are a lot of things, very important companies in Avenida Paulista. Okay, looking for more questions. Yes, in the south of Brazil, there are many words from German origin. I'm not sure about the rest of Brazil. I've never thought about that. I've never heard any word that comes from Germany, I'm not sure. But in the south, it is kind of common because we had a lot of immigrants coming from Germany to the south of Brazil. So there are a lot of food and other words that they use, and a lot of last names, like Langhammer. Actually, with the German accent, it would be Langhammer. Okay, guys, looking for more questions. Okay. Is Guarulhos a nice airport? Well, it's a big airport. I'm not sure if it's nice. I think it's nice. It has a lot of restaurants. So if you have to stay there for a while, you will be comfortable. Ok. Preciosa e querida tem o mesmo significado? Kind of. We don't use the word preciosa much in Brazil. Preciosa means precious, so it is more used for like pedra preciosa, like a precious stone. You could use to talk about a person as well, but it's not that common. The word querida is very, very common. It means like if you want to call, it can be used in the sense of dear. So if you are starting an email and you want to start with dear John, querido John. So it can have this formal use, but also can be used with friends. When you want to be kind to your friend, you could say querido. So in this sense, it means darling. So it could have these two meanings: dear in a more formal tone, or it can mean darling in a more informal tone. The word querido, querida is much more common than preciosa. We don't use the word preciosa much. Okay, amazing questions, guys. I hope this was useful. So I think that's it for today. If I have not answered your question, I'm sorry, it's really hard to read all your comments, but I'll be here again next week, next Thursday, 12 p.m. at the same time, and I hope I'll see you then. Um beijo grande e até a próxima. Tchau, tchau!